Charles Spurgeon often spoke about the importance of maintaining faith in times of adversity, illustrating this with countless examples from both Scripture and life. He firmly believed that challenges, while uncomfortable, should be seen as opportunities for growth in faith. When facing difficulties, our natural tendency might be to question God's plan or even lose hope. However, Spurgeon taught that it is precisely during these times that our faith is tested and refined. In Spurgeon's perspective, faith does not mean an absence of difficulties. On the contrary, he argued that true faith is often forged in the furnace of hardship. He would often remind his congregation that faith isn't merely about believing when everything is going well, it is about holding firm to God's promises when life seems bleak. He would say, faith is the hand that takes the blessing when it is given, and the heart that still trusts when it is withdrawn. These words highlight the resilience faith provides when life is full of challenges. Spurgeon often used the imagery of storms to describe adversity. Just as a sailor's skill is proven during rough seas, a Christian's faith is revealed during times of trial. It is easy to believe in God when life is peaceful, but the true test comes when we are faced with hardship. Spurgeon believed that these trials should be embraced because they serve to deepen our trust in God. Just as a ship's anchor is tested when it faces turbulent waves, our faith is strengthened in the midst of struggles. Spurgeon would often point to biblical figures, such as Job, to show how faith in adversity can lead to personal transformation. Job's story is one of unrelenting faith despite overwhelming suffering. He lost everything, from his wealth to his family, yet he never lost his trust in God. Spurgeon saw in Job's story a clear lesson: adversity is not a punishment but an opportunity to draw closer to God. According to Spurgeon, the deeper the trial, the greater the reward for those who endure with faith. For those who hold on to their trust in God, even when everything else falls apart, there is a promise of spiritual growth and divine blessing. Spurgeon taught that trials allow believers to experience God's faithfulness in a deeper way. When faced with difficulty, we are often forced to rely on God in ways we wouldn't have otherwise. This reliance builds a trust that is not based on circumstance but on the steadfastness of God's character. Spurgeon said that sometimes God brings us into difficult situations not because he enjoys our suffering, but because he wants to teach us how to rely solely on him. He explained that when we rely on God through challenges, we come to understand his provision, his mercy, and his sustaining power in a way we would not otherwise experience. Spurgeon's sermons also emphasized the importance of holding on to God's promises during hard times. For him, faith was not just about believing in God's existence, it was about trusting his character and promises. Even in the face of pain, Spurgeon urged believers to remember God's faithfulness in the past. He believed that recalling God's past blessings can serve as a foundation for enduring present trials. Spurgeon often referenced verses such as Romans 8:28, which states that all things work together for good to them that love God, reminding his listeners that God's ultimate purpose is always good, even when we cannot see the full picture. In the face of adversity, Spurgeon would encourage his audience to remember that faith in God is not simply a passive belief, it is an active trust that empowers individuals to move forward despite their circumstances. This trust in God does not promise the absence of pain, but it does promise that God will be with us through it all. Spurgeon argued that challenges, when met with faith, become opportunities for spiritual growth, as they teach us to rely not on our own strength but on God's power. Spurgeon believed that faith in adversity gives us a deeper understanding of God's love and care. He frequently reassured his congregation that God's love for his people is unchanging, even in the darkest moments. It is during our trials that we often experience God's love in the most profound ways. When we are weak, he is strong. When we are tired, he is our rest. Spurgeon often quoted scripture such as 2 Corinthians 12:9, where Paul says, "But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." For Spurgeon, this verse encapsulated the essence of faith in adversity, understanding that God's strength is most visible when we are at our lowest. Charles Spurgeon, the renowned preacher, frequently discussed the importance of seeing divine purpose in the trials and challenges that we encounter in life. He firmly believed that nothing in a believer's life is without meaning, and every hardship or suffering is under the sovereign control of God. Spurgeon often reminded his congregation that adversity, while difficult, is never pointless or merely an unfortunate circumstance. Rather, it is a means by which God works in the lives of his people, bringing about growth, maturity, and spiritual transformation. Spurgeon illustrated this idea by drawing attention to the biblical concept that trials are instruments for refining our character. He believed that God allows challenges to come into our lives, not to break us, but to purify and strengthen us. Just as gold must be refined in the fire to remove impurities, our hearts and spirits are shaped and purified through the trials that we face. This process of refining is often painful, but it is necessary for the development of deeper faith and stronger character. The biblical principle that Spurgeon highlighted was that the trials we face are designed for our good. In his sermons, he often cited passages like Romans 8:28, which assures believers that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Even in the midst of difficulty, there is the assurance that God's purposes are at work, and the challenges we encounter are not random or senseless. Every struggle, every pain, and every moment of hardship serves as part of God's greater plan for our lives. Spurgeon urged his listeners to trust in this truth, knowing that even though the situation may seem hard to understand at the time, God has a reason for it. Spurgeon was also quick to point out that trials are not meant to punish us, but to draw us closer to God. He argued that, in fact, it is through suffering that we are able to develop a deeper dependency on God. Often, when life is going well, people tend to rely on their own strength, forgetting their need for divine intervention. However, when trials come, they force us to lean on God and seek his help. This brings about spiritual growth as we learn to trust God in new and profound ways. In times of distress, Spurgeon emphasized that God is always near to his people, ready to comfort and guide them. Additionally, Spurgeon highlighted that the purpose of trials extends beyond personal growth. Trials can also be used to deepen our relationship with others. Spurgeon taught that suffering has the potential to cultivate empathy and compassion in our hearts. When we experience pain and hardship, we become more attuned to the struggles of those around us. This can lead to greater opportunities for ministry as we become more able to support and encourage others who are going through similar challenges. Spurgeon encouraged believers to see trials as a way to glorify God. He believed that how we respond to difficulties is a testimony to the world of the strength and faithfulness of our God. In moments of suffering, our response should be one of unwavering trust in God's character, even when the circumstances are difficult. When others see us enduring trials with grace and peace, it becomes a powerful witness to the reality of God's presence and his ability to sustain us through even the toughest times. Spurgeon often reminded his audience that trials are temporary. He pointed out that while suffering may feel overwhelming in the moment, it is important to keep in mind that all hardships are fleeting compared to the eternal glory that awaits us. He encouraged believers to fix their eyes on the promise of eternal life and to endure present struggles with the hope that they will soon be over. This eternal perspective is vital in understanding God's purpose in trials, for it allows us to view suffering not as the end, but as a brief period of refining that ultimately leads to greater joy and fulfillment in the presence of God. One of the most powerful messages that Charles Spurgeon delivers through his sermons is the importance of seeing the bigger picture when faced with challenges. Often, when we encounter difficulties, our immediate response is to focus on the pain or frustration of the present moment. We get trapped in the small, immediate details of what is going wrong, and our vision becomes clouded by the weight of our struggles. However, Spurgeon challenges us to lift our gaze beyond the present discomfort and look at the broader scope of our lives. Spurgeon often spoke of how, in moments of trial, we are prone to forget the larger plan that God has for us. In the midst of a storm, it is easy to lose sight of the fact that God is orchestrating every aspect of our lives, including the difficulties we face. Spurgeon believed that these challenges are not meaningless events, but part of a greater purpose that ultimately leads to spiritual growth and blessings. He often reminded his listeners that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. This view allows us to approach adversity with a mindset that sees beyond the immediate and understands that every challenge can bring us closer to fulfilling God's plan for our lives. The bigger picture that Spurgeon refers to is not just about enduring pain, but about recognizing the transformation that can come through it. Every challenge has the potential to shape us, mold us, and refine us. Spurgeon believed that God uses hardship as a tool for spiritual growth. By facing trials with faith, we allow ourselves to be shaped into stronger, more resilient individuals. The struggles we face today may be preparing us for greater opportunities tomorrow. In this light, what seems like an obstacle today may be a necessary step toward a future blessing. It is this perspective that helps us maintain hope and perseverance in difficult times. Spurgeon's teaching suggests that seeing the bigger picture requires faith and trust in God's wisdom. While we may not always understand the reasons behind the trials we encounter, we can trust that God's plan is perfect. Our limited human understanding cannot fully grasp the infinite wisdom of God. However, by trusting that He sees the bigger picture, we can find peace in knowing that the challenges we face are part of a greater purpose that we may not yet comprehend. Spurgeon believed that God's sovereign hand guides every aspect of our lives, and even when things seem unclear, He is at work, shaping our character and preparing us for something greater. Spurgeon emphasized the importance of hope when we are faced with difficulties. He often spoke of the importance of keeping our eyes on the eternal rewards rather than the temporary trials. The bigger picture is not just about the here and now, but about the eternal perspective we hold as believers. Every challenge we face has an eternal significance, and when we view our struggles through the lens of eternity, we can find purpose and meaning even in the most difficult circumstances. Spurgeon encouraged his congregation to look beyond their immediate suffering and keep their hearts focused on the hope of eternal life, where all struggles will be wiped away. Seeing the bigger picture is not just about understanding the reasons behind our trials, but also about seeing how our challenges can benefit others. Spurgeon often spoke of the power of shared experiences and how our struggles can become a source of encouragement for others who are facing similar battles. When we view our challenges through the lens of community, we realize that our difficulties are not just for our own growth, but can also serve to inspire and help those around us. By sharing our experiences and the lessons we've learned, we can turn our challenges into opportunities to bless others and build stronger connections within our communities. In essence, seeing the bigger picture means recognizing that the difficulties we face are part of a larger plan designed to shape us, strengthen us, and prepare us for greater opportunities. It requires faith, trust, and an eternal perspective that allows us to endure hardships with hope and perseverance. By embracing this mindset, we are able to transform our challenges into stepping stones toward personal and spiritual growth, and we are better equipped to help others along the way. Endurance and perseverance are fundamental virtues that help us navigate through life's challenges, and Charles Spurgeon frequently emphasized their importance in overcoming adversity. To Spurgeon, the Christian walk is not a sprint but a long and often difficult journey, where enduring trials and remaining steadfast in faith play a critical role. In his sermons, Spurgeon repeatedly stressed that enduring hardships with patience is not only necessary for personal growth, but also a testimony of the strength and resilience granted by God. Spurgeon believed that challenges were an integral part of life, specifically for those who seek to follow the Christian path. He noted that trials serve as a means of refining character and solidifying one's faith. In his writings, he spoke about how life's struggles test our ability to persevere and push through times of difficulty. Often it is not about avoiding hardship, but about how we handle it when it arrives. According to Spurgeon, the true measure of faith is revealed not when everything is smooth, but when one is faced with the trials of life. How we endure during these times speaks volumes about our relationship with God. Perseverance, in Spurgeon's view, was more than just pushing forward. It was about doing so with the right attitude. It wasn't simply about surviving, but thriving through the challenges. The idea of enduring meant staying committed, trusting in God's timing, and holding on to the promises He has made. Spurgeon frequently pointed out that while challenges may feel heavy in the moment, they are never without purpose. In fact, he often referred to these times of trial as divine appointments where God was at work shaping the believer's character. To endure meant to have a deep trust that God would use the adversity for something far greater than the temporary discomfort or suffering. Spurgeon also recognized the difficulty of remaining steadfast through prolonged hardships. He acknowledged that it is easy to lose hope or to feel as though the struggle is insurmountable, but he emphasized that perseverance is a choice. It is a choice that requires daily strength, often beyond our own capabilities, and this is where Spurgeon drew attention to the importance of divine help. He believed that God provides the strength necessary to persevere through even the most challenging situations. In his sermons, Spurgeon often referred to the Apostle Paul's words in the New Testament, where Paul expresses how he could do all things through Christ who strengthens him. For Spurgeon, this was a reminder that true perseverance comes not from our own strength, but from reliance on God's power. Another aspect that Spurgeon highlighted was the fact that perseverance often leads to spiritual maturity. Every trial, when met with patience and a trusting heart, strengthens a person's faith. Through the act of enduring, believers learn to see God's hand in all situations, growing in wisdom and understanding. Spurgeon likened this process to the growth of a tree that, when battered by storms, ultimately becomes stronger and more rooted in the earth. Each challenge faced and overcome adds to the believer's spiritual fortitude, and each step of perseverance takes them closer to becoming the person God intends them to be. Spurgeon pointed out that perseverance isn't just about enduring for the sake of it. It is, rather, an active and purposeful pursuit of God's will despite the obstacles in the way. It is a continual striving towards spiritual growth, knowing that every trial is an opportunity for God to reveal His faithfulness and His purpose. For Spurgeon, to persevere was to align oneself with God's larger plan, understanding that the trials faced today may lead to greater opportunities and rewards tomorrow. Perseverance, in this light, becomes a means of glorifying God, as it demonstrates trust and dependence on Him, regardless of external circumstances. Spurgeon also spoke about the rewards of perseverance. Though the journey of endurance might feel long and difficult, Spurgeon reminded believers that there is great reward in remaining steadfast. He often cited the biblical principle that those who endure to the end will be crowned with life, drawing from James 1:12, where it is said, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." For Spurgeon, this was a source of great encouragement. While earthly trials may be temporary, the rewards of faithfulness and perseverance are eternal. In sum, endurance and perseverance, according to Charles Spurgeon, are not just about enduring hardship for hardship's sake. They are about actively trusting God, remaining faithful, and growing spiritually through every difficulty. Trials, though tough, become opportunities for spiritual deepening, and perseverance becomes the key to unlocking the greater purposes that God has for us. Through perseverance, believers gain strength, wisdom, and a closer relationship with God, learning that every challenge, no matter how overwhelming, holds the potential for growth and ultimate victory. One of the most profound teachings that Charles Spurgeon imparted to his followers was the idea that in moments of weakness, we can experience God's strength. In his sermons, Spurgeon repeatedly highlighted the importance of recognizing that our perceived limitations, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses are not hindrances to our spiritual growth, but rather opportunities for divine intervention and strength. Spurgeon understood that human nature tends to resist weakness. We often strive to be strong, self-sufficient, and capable in all aspects of life. However, Spurgeon's perspective was radically different. He believed that it was precisely in our weakest moments that God's power is most evident. In his famous sermon, The Power of Weakness, he explained how God's grace is sufficient, and that in our weakness we give God the opportunity to show His strength. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, famously says, "When I am weak, then I am strong." This paradoxical statement is central to Spurgeon's understanding of divine strength. Spurgeon was keenly aware that as humans, we are frail and susceptible to failure, illness, disappointment, and fear. Yet it is in the very acknowledgement of our frailty that we open ourselves to the power of God's grace. He often quoted Paul's words to remind his congregation that true spiritual strength comes not from the pride of self-reliance, but from surrendering to God's will, trusting in His power, and accepting His guidance. Spurgeon often referred to the Bible as the source of strength during times of weakness. He would remind his congregation that God did not promise a life free from trials, but he did promise his presence and help in those times of need. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who, in their moments of greatest weakness, found that God was able to do extraordinary things through them. For instance, Moses, who initially felt inadequate to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, was empowered by God to accomplish what seemed impossible. In the same way, God takes our weakest moments and transforms them into opportunities for his strength to shine through. In Spurgeon's view, challenges are often a divine setup for the display of God's miraculous power. He would teach that God uses our frailty to demonstrate his sovereignty. Whether in physical illness, financial hardship, or emotional despair, when we admit our weaknesses, we give God the chance to intervene and work through us. It is this divine exchange, our weakness for his strength, that forms the foundation of the Christian walk. Instead of feeling disheartened or discouraged by weakness, believers are encouraged to rely on God more fully. It is in this dependency that they become stronger in faith, more rooted in trust, and more effective in their spiritual lives. Spurgeon also taught that the recognition of weakness leads to humility. In his writings and sermons, he would often emphasize the importance of humility before God. Weakness is not a mark of failure, he argued, but a necessary condition for spiritual growth. When we acknowledge that we cannot do everything on our own, we position ourselves in the perfect place to receive the strength and grace that God offers. This humility, Spurgeon insisted, is what leads to true spiritual empowerment. Through humility, a believer finds freedom from the pride that leads to self-reliance and opens the door to God's strength. Spurgeon emphasized that the struggle against weakness is not something we face alone. God does not leave us to fight our battles by ourselves. Instead, he promises to be our refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. When we feel weak, it is often an invitation for us to draw closer to God, to lean on him, and to trust that his power is made perfect in our weakness. Spurgeon would often remind his listeners that the strength God provides is not just for the moment of the struggle, but also for the journey of transformation that follows. As we experience God's power in our weakness, we are gradually made stronger in spirit, more compassionate toward others, and more equipped to face the next challenge. In essence, Spurgeon's teaching on weakness and strength is a call to surrender. It is a call to surrender our illusions of self-sufficiency and acknowledge our need for divine help. It is a call to trust that God is present, even in our most vulnerable moments, and that he is working through our weaknesses to bring about his divine purposes. Through this process, what once seemed like an obstacle becomes an opportunity, a chance for God's strength to be made manifest in our lives in ways we could never have imagined. Hope is a central theme in Charles Spurgeon's sermons, and he often reminded his listeners that no matter how bleak the circumstances, hope remains a vital force in overcoming challenges. Spurgeon understood that in life we all go through moments of despair, doubt, and difficulty. It is easy to feel overwhelmed when facing trials, whether they come in the form of personal loss, financial struggles, health issues, or any other challenge that seems insurmountable. Yet, in these very moments of darkness, Spurgeon teaches that we must hold on to hope and trust that God has a greater plan for us. Spurgeon often emphasized that hope is not a passive or wishful thinking. It is an active, living force that sustains us through our most difficult times. For Spurgeon, hope is grounded in the faithfulness of God, and it is this assurance that empowers us to keep going even when the path seems unclear. In his view, the believer is never alone in their trials. God walks alongside them, offering both comfort and strength. Hope, therefore, becomes a source of encouragement, lifting the spirit even when circumstances would suggest otherwise. One of Spurgeon's key messages was that hope is not dependent on the circumstances, but on God's eternal promises. The world may offer fleeting pleasures or solutions that are temporary, but the hope that comes from God is unshakable and eternal. This hope transcends our immediate struggles and enables us to look beyond them, understanding that God is working behind the scenes to bring about something greater. Even when we cannot see the full picture, hope assures us that God's hand is at work, guiding us toward his purpose. Spurgeon often drew parallels between hope and the Christian's ultimate hope in salvation. He reminded his congregation that the greatest hope of all is found in the redemption of Jesus Christ. This eternal hope anchors us in the present moment, giving us a reason to press forward despite our struggles. If we are secure in our eternal hope, then the temporary struggles of life lose their power to defeat us. We are reminded that this world is not our final home, and that the challenges we face here are but momentary in light of eternity. Through his own personal hardships, Spurgeon demonstrated the power of hope in action. Despite suffering from frequent bouts of illness and deep personal trials, he never allowed his circumstances to steal his hope or joy. He often spoke about how hope, when grounded in God's promises, provides an unshakable foundation. This hope is not based on what we see with our eyes, but on the faith we hold in our hearts. In fact, Spurgeon encouraged believers to turn their eyes away from the immediate situation and look to the greater promises of God, which are sure and steadfast. Hope is also intricately tied to encouragement, both for ourselves and for others. Spurgeon's sermons were full of words of encouragement, urging believers to look beyond the immediate and trust in the long-term promises of God. He urged his congregation to not only hold on to their own hope, but to become vessels of hope and encouragement for those around them. When we face challenges, it is easy to feel isolated or as if we are the only ones struggling. Yet Spurgeon reminds us that we are part of a larger family of believers, and we have a responsibility to lift one another up. By sharing words of hope and encouragement, we become instruments of God's love in the world, helping others see that even in the darkest times, there is a light of hope shining brightly. Hope is more than just a fleeting feeling. It is an anchor, a guiding force that can carry us through any storm. In Spurgeon's teachings, hope is inseparable from God's faithfulness and love. When we hold on to this hope, we are not only equipped to face challenges, but are empowered to turn those very challenges into opportunities for growth, spiritual maturity, and greater dependence on God. Hope is the lens through which we see the world differently, one that allows us to recognize the potential within every challenge, knowing that God has the power to bring good from any situation.